Welcome back to Unboxing OD. In today's episode, I'm joined by Melissa Donegan for a conversation that gets right to the heart of how we lead and work with intention. We dig into what really matters to design for change rather than simply react to it, and why understanding the human side of change is just as important as the strategy. Melissa shares her perspective on building trust through empathetic listening, the difference between hearing to respond and listening to understand, and how mentors can open doors for those who might not yet see their own readiness. We also talk about sustaining change long after the initial rollout, the nuances of organizational culture, and how to keep people engaged through every phase of transformation. This one blends practical tools, personal stories, and honest reflections on what it takes to help people and organizations grow, especially when change feels uncomfortable. So grab that cup of coffee and let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. We're joined today by Melissa Donegan. Melissa is an organizational development consultant and human capital manager with over a decade of experience across federal government, healthcare, higher education, and technology sectors. She recently served as an industrial organizational psychology subject matter expert supporting the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, where she led strategic hiring process improvements aligned with the Office of Personnel Management's benchmarks. Passionate about designing human-centered systems, Melissa is now focused on expanding her impact across industries through data-driven, empathetic solutions that elevate workforce and organizational performance. And I just want to say welcome, Melissa, and thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited just because we've started to build this relationship off of LinkedIn, having never previously met. I mean, we talked a little bit yesterday and everything, but how's everything going today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Kenneth. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to have you too. So let's get right into it. I mean, it's one of the things is you definitely moved through some pretty diverse spaces. Federal agencies, healthcare, tech, higher education. When you look back at that journey, what do you think it's taught you about how people and organizations actually move through change?
So, everyone moves through change differently and at their own space, and their starting point of readiness is different. And one of the images that comes to mind is one I saw recently on LinkedIn. It was a picture of two tellers, and the signs above their heads were people who wanted change and people who wanted to change. And the person that has people who want change, so many people are in the line, everyone's signing up. And then for the teller that says people who want to change, there's not a single person in line. And that can be the experience. Sometimes people are ready for something different. They have a different expectation, maybe a different norm that they would like to see enacted where they work. But when it comes to their behavior change and how to translate that to their teams and across their organization, that might not be something that they're prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we were talking a little bit about it yesterday too, about that, that image that you had seen, and I know, like statistically, I know that, in I forget which research study it was, but like it was like Gallup or something that was talking about like 74% of the workforce wants change, but when change initiative come out, like only like 25% of people are actually engaged in it. So, and I know change is so, we a lot of us, we know when a system is not working.
Hmm.
But, we also, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday too. Like we know a system isn't broken, but we know a system might be broken and we know it might want to be changed. But, trying to get people on board with that change because there's a lot of work that goes into change. I mean, we hear it's like, for me, change is just a buzzword.
Hmm.
It's like, all right, change. And it's like, all right, well, what does change look like? And then all of a sudden you start mapping it out and people are like, well, I don't want change that much, or I'm not that engaged, in terms of like, my job and my role and all this kind of stuff. So,
Definitely. And it's not
yeah.
one size fits all. I think that's something that's forgotten a lot, as there's so many different people with different job positions and perspectives. And different objectives that they need to solve and are in charge of. So it's really that strategic communication, that strategic rollout. Who needs to know what when? How does that behavior change look for those different groups? And it's so intricate and detailed and woven. And it's a lot of work. There's a lot of change management over time that goes into those bigger OD deliveries.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that leads me right into my next question. So, you're talking about, we're talking a lot about, designing for change instead of just reacting to it, which is such a powerful shift, I mean, because, change, you have to design for it. It's like, with OD professionals, I talk about specifically, like to understand project management, or understand like, what goes into, you know, aligning and outlining and doing all that stuff. So yeah, so we're talking a lot about designing for change instead of just reacting to it. So which is again a powerful shift. What does that really look like in practice? And in your experience, what tends to get in the way?
Yeah. I mean, so designing for change, you can't gatekeep it. I think that's something we talked about yesterday. You can't hide change or make it so that it's not communicated and something that's, brought top down, bottom up. And you also have to know how to explain the goal, how to explain a pivot. Organizations change very frequently, but people, it takes a lot longer for their behavior to catch up to the change. So, the two biggest buckets I've seen in real life organizations is either a company is trying to innovate, they want to change, they want the hot new thing. They want to be cutting edge. They want a new product for their client, or they want to be so efficient. They want to be the absolute best at what they're doing. And companies that focus on one or the other and not both are the most successful, according to the literature. But you have to then teach people how to align their behavior change to that mission. Those people who may have been efficiency experts now in an innovative phase are going to be really uncomfortable because they've learned how to be the best, to be the absolute highest performer at this efficiency. So now being like, oh no, it's innovation that we want can be really hard for some of those top performers and just confusing for people in general. So you have to explain why, what's in it for them that this change is happening. It's staying relevant, keeping our company at the top of its game. It's providing opportunity for those people. It's providing, monetary incentives for those high performers that can help the company reach those goals. So you really not only have to communicate, have to walk through what does behavior change look like and model that for them and follow it up, but also tell them what's in it for them. Like you said earlier, what's the buy-in that, is going to be the realistic change and not just fall by the wayside of the day-to-day norms.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it just, just listening to you just reminds me of that, what is it, diffusion or diffusion and innovation theory. It just reminds me of that, like the 2.5% innovators, the 13.5%, like, early adopters. And I mean, if you think about that, like the 2.5% innovators and the 13.5, that's only 16%. You have
Hmm.
84% of the workforce to really work towards
Yeah.
and catching those laggards, the last of the laggards in there, like, and exactly what you're saying too. Providing the first of all, providing the why we're making these changes, but providing those incentives, providing the support. And it's not just support through the project, it's actually support after the project is completed or
Mhm.
after the change is completed as well. And checking in with those individuals and seeing how they're reacting to the new change, because you can have this new change and have everybody get on board, but then 6 months later you're seeing that there's a fall off of engagement because maybe it's not working the way it's supposed to be working, or maybe it really has impacted them. So it's keeping that keeping people in mind. And I know we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, about like the we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we're going to be talking about how you're able to keep the people centered, the people first. And and again, in this podcast we talk about that. We talk about organizational development from a human centered perspective. And that's kind of like where we started. Like my first episode is like, the first episode of this podcast was like human-centered organizational development. And that was it. And you're talking to that like right now. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There's two different set of people that also need to lead, let's say, an innovative change, but then the sustainment piece comes in, and that's completely different because, and I could talk all about sustainment separately, but yes, those are two completely different phases and completely different engagement styles. And some people are going to be more engaged with the new, with the change, with the problem solving, and others are going to be happy when things level out and are more sustaining. But those people are probably not going to be in both phases. So you have to keep people engaged even after.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. So one of the things you talk about too, you've also spoken about is navigating your career. So we're talking about like change a little bit. So let's look at it from almost like a personal perspective. So you've spoken about navigating your career with mindfulness and intentionality. Was there a moment where you really felt that, where you made a choice that shaped everything after?
Yes. I mean, in my personal life, when it comes to navigating and being intentional or mindful with a choice, something that sparks for me is my master's degree. I got my undergraduate in public health, and then I ended up working, I think, about 8 years at that point in consulting, some of it in public health, some of it in human capital. And at that point, a lot of my peers were getting an MBA. And I thought that that was such a useful degree, but also sometimes it seemed expensive. Sometimes it didn't seem aligned. I wasn't very drawn to finance or drawn to being the CEO or the CFO in charge of so many people because I understand how much of a weight that is and how important that is. For me, I just like to problem solve. I love to problem solve. And when I was working at Deloitte, I had a coach who was an IO psychologist, an industrial and organizational psychologist. And it was just great hearing her experiences. And she brought me into the fold of a larger community of individuals who had that specialty. And I learned so much. And I was like, oh, I'm really already doing that with my change management. It's working on change and organizational development at the organization level and then at the workforce level. And really, that's just looking at the health, looking at the sustainment, looking at the breadth of challenges that occur on the organizational level and occur or on the people individual level, and how do you make life better for both? How do you make people better for organizations and organizations better for their people?
Yeah, and I know with organizational psychology or IO psychology, getting into this field for me, realizing like, I've worked in places that have been really, really good. I've worked in some really great places, but I've worked in some pretty poor places as well. And
Mhm.
knowing that, like when I found out what IO psychology actually was, I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. I want to try to figure out how to help like make systems better, make the workforce better, because I truly believe that most people they don't want to work.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to go to work. Like some people really they don't mind it. Some people really love their work, but a lot of people like they just go to work because they want to get a paycheck because they want to pay for like life stuff and stuff like that. And, I don't know statistically. I could probably do a research study if I needed to, but statistically, I don't know. But realistically, like I think that the workforce just generally not that they don't want to work. They just generally just want to go, maybe, talk to their community of people that are there and the friends and acquaintances that they've made there. And they look at it as like a little bit of a social event while doing some work. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about like, and that's what it was like, just IO psychology, just in general, like how do we just make it better for people and not
Yeah,
perfect, just better, you know?
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really well-being at work. That's
Yeah.
what it,
Yeah.
what it is to me. I care about those things. I care about the health of people. And as you said, I'm very people centered, not only when I look at data or when I'm doing those work things, but just in general. I'm very much an empath. I love to hear about people's stories. I care about how they feel, about what their experience is like. I'm very much an improvement mindset. So I want that to be better. And I want people to also have a better experience than I did. So if there was something I found challenging or I thought could have been more streamlined and easier, I would even circle back in one of my previous jobs and make onboarding guides for younger practitioners that were following, where I was like, I wish I would have known these 10 things. So I would start to just onboard them in addition so they didn't have as much of a challenge getting onboarded.
Yeah, I love that too because I took that approach in my last two jobs where I created a reference guide for the person that was going to be, taking over my position. Just like even just like these are the projects I'm working on. This is where I'm at with it. Like if you want to continue these, like if these are still priorities, here's where you find them in the folders and like that, all of that. Here's the important numbers to know,
Yes.
contacts and stuff like that. Like, I know, like, just and because I know, like, it's I've walked into jobs where they were just like, "Okay, we don't know what you do, so you just figure it out yourself." It's like, I don't want to figure it out myself. I want a
No.
little bit of direction,
Yeah,
you
especially
know?
that IT number. Everyone needs that IT
I
number day
do.
one, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you. One of the things you talked about, you shared a story about mentoring someone who didn't yet see their own readiness. So we talked a little bit about change readiness, and didn't and we can talk about change readiness on a organizational level. We can talk about it at an individual level too. But you shared that story about mentoring someone who didn't yet see their own readiness. What allowed you to see her potential so clearly, and what do you think makes mentorship actually matter?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the person that we're talking about, her name is Ava, and she is wonderful. It was honestly really easy to see her potential so clearly, so fast. I'm the type of person who values ideas and leaning in, and I don't put as much value in years of experience or titles. It's mostly about the person. What are they willing to give in that moment? What can they provide? What do they want to learn even? And my experience with her was that she was so competent. She could code and she was a great collaborator and really good at communication. She was also a walking index and encyclopedia. She knew where all the answers were in our document library, and she would be able to add in a very respectful way additional context if we were answering questions at the beginning of the project that wasn't necessarily accurate. She would jump in and be like, oh, we do have that information and it's here and this is what it says. So it was just great because she was enthusiastic, she was dialed in, but also she was so humble and just willing to lean in anywhere. She was very agile, was very flexible in all of the things that she did, but she was also very intuitive. We jumped right into collaborating with her. She always had active listening. We would talk about the ways, for example, we would conduct data analysis. We would talk about the different ways we could do it, what would be most effective. We did a ton of interviews together. So we wanted to compare that across teams, across the different positions we were interviewing, across the different sessions with the same position. So we did a lot of mapping together. And again, was her first real job. And for me, she was already more skilled than people I had worked with for 10 years. So for me, seeing her potential was so easy and mentoring her was so much fun. But something that I learned is so important is to bring people up, to make space to highlight them to leadership. And one of the first things I did when she started helping me evaluate a ton of data and create deliverables was say to our manager, hey, Ava's doing half of this. She really needs to be part of the presentation. She really needs to be given a voice and a space to be highlighted because it's very important. This is her work. And I think having credit, no matter your age or your years of experience, of getting credit for that work and people seeing, wow, this person has so much value.
Yeah, I love that message, by the way. Like the giving the credit where credit is due, and I know, like, I hear a lot about it too, and I don't know, again, statistically, I don't know, but you always hear like, "Oh, this person, did all the work and then the manager or the director or somebody else took all the credit for it, and it's, but absolutely giving credit where credit is due is so, so important and building those individuals up, like you're saying.
Mhm.
Just from a different perspective too, like, we hear a lot about mentorship in the workplace, and we talk a lot about mentorship. So for a person, it was Ava, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for a person like Ava, like beyond seeing her skill set, what about her openness and willingness to be mentored?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, she was great. She was just very open to coaching. That's really what it came down to, was she was extremely coachable. But honestly, there's such a fine line when you're coaching someone. Make sure you're coaching someone not for your own aims always. And what I mean by that is each individual brings so much breadth and individuality and diversity into the way they think about things and deliver things. Yes, coach them on maybe talk slower the next time you present practical things that make sense, but don't mold everyone in your own vision. That's not good for anybody, and that's really just going to decrease the amount of knowledge and the amount of inspiration and the amount of the beautiful depth of work that you could provide. And for me, I was like, she doesn't need much coaching. She really needs encouragement. And a lot of me just validating, I see you. You're so impressive already. You're already working at this next level, and just keep going. Just keep showing up. Just keep being consistent and listening and being a trusted person who always delivers and goes above and beyond. But she's also a friend and somebody that you could confide in. So I could talk about her all day.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that perspective too, like, when you talk about mentorship again, you can create mentorship programs, you can be a mentor, you can be a mentee. I'm still a mentee. Like, I still need to be
Me
coached.
too.
I want to say like I know everything, and I definitely don't. And I like to be reminded that I'm barely scratching the surface every once in a while, just because, and I find that when, like, the PSYOP community, it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing really well. I really know what I'm doing. And all of a sudden I go to the PSYOP community and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But
But
I'm
isn't
here to
that a
learn.
great thing? How boring would life be if you already knew everything?
Exactly.
I said that to a friend recently who had just gotten his dream job, and he was worried about, oh gosh, what if I don't know everything? And I was like, you don't need to know everything. It's the beauty of it. Every organization is different. You're going to learn the way they do things anyway, but just know you have an entire community behind you. Just reach out, utilize that community. You don't have to know everything. And again, how boring would life be if you already knew all the answers?
Exactly. I would be like a pompous know-it-all. I'd be like, well, that's not what's supposed to be said.
Exactly.
That's not the way
Yeah,
that works.
that person doesn't get invited to the parties. Yeah,
Exactly. And I want to be invited to the party. Okay. That's
exactly.
what it is. So, excellent. Thank you. So another thing you talk about too, and you talk about like empathetic listening. So empathetic
Mhm.
listening seems to be really a huge part of how you lead. So from your perspective, what's the real difference between listening just to respond and actually listening to understand? And how does that shift things in a team?
Yeah. I mean, this really came as an aha moment for me pretty early on in my education. I had my undergraduate in public health, and we took a population health class. And we were talking about implementing programs or implementing projects in a population. Let's say it had to do with food scarcity or water quality or something like that. The most important thing that I learned was you need to meet the community. You need to build their trust first. So you really need to know who in that community is a gatekeeper. And in that, I mean someone who's trusted, someone that has the ears of the community that you can build a relationship with, that they can introduce you and bring you into that group of people. But then also, when you get there, you need to listen to what that group of people needs first. You may have a goal, you may have something that you want to enact on this group of people, but you need to hear what's important to them first, because maybe there's a need that you can help them meet that to them feels more immediate. And then after that, you can build on that, and then you can deliver that desired niche or the desired component that you think that that group would really benefit from. And then you're trusted, and then it's more likely to happen and more likely to be adopted and something that people want. when they know you hear them, they know they can trust you to deliver what they've told you, and then you build on that and explain why you think, this was great. I think this would be great too.
Yeah, yeah, and I know you working in the federal government, and we talked a little bit yesterday about I worked in tribal government, so but exactly what you're saying, like going to the community and really finding out what the community needs,
Hmm.
and listening to the community because yes, like we can we can design programs and strategies and all that kind of stuff from scratch, and that's all good and great. But if it comes from a perspective of what we think is right, what we think is good, it's going to
Hmm.
miss the mark,
Yeah.
and again, that goes back to that goes back to change when, like when, for example, in this case, when the community actually has a voice and they can initiate that, they're going to be, and they're stakeholders in that, they're going
Hmm.
to be more likely to be engaged in the change as opposed to somebody coming and saying, "Oh well, we're just doing it this way." So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I think an example of that, imagine reading the first page and the last page of a story and being like, that was the ending. Can you imagine not bringing people through all the threads of why the beginning ended up in a certain way? You have to have that buy in. You have to explain. You have to get their input and make changes and make pivots and customize it to what their true needs are because every group is different. It's not one size fit all. I've very rarely seen that it's ever one size fit all.
Yeah, 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 and absolutely. And you as a consultant too, like every organization, every business, every company that you work with, they have their own culture, they have their own structure, they have
Hmm.
their own way of doing things, they have their own personalities.
Yes.
And it's really, and where empathetic listening for you, for all of us comes in, is beneficial is when we can actually hear and actually know what the pulse of those
Hmm.
organizations or communities or businesses or companies really are. And that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it because, empathetic listening, in organizational development in any field, but for this here in organizational development is critical. I mean, it is
Hmm.
crucial to what we do, especially because we are, involved in so many different areas from policy and process, strategic
Hmm.
planning, succession planning, mentorship, like all of that stuff. Like we have to design our systems and our programs to and help the communities or businesses or whatever. We have to help them from their perspective, not from
Hmm.
our perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that's definitely something that I think will resonate with a lot of people. Just being able to understand how important that skill is. You're not born with
Hmm.
empathetic listening. It is a skill that you can learn. And if people don't, if people aren't sure how to do it, I will strongly recommend doing some trainings on active
Yeah.
listening and empathetic listening, and read Daniel Goleman's, emotional intelligence,
Yes.
figuring all that out. And again, like the Daniel Goleman book still has a lot of holes in it, but it's a great place to start.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's really interesting too. I don't remember the statistic, but how much of communication is done with nonverbal? It's definitely the majority of communication is nonverbal. So it's really being attuned. That's what empathy really is. It's really watching, listening, the tone, the mannerisms, the way someone's holding their body, the way that they are in different settings, who they're comfortable around, who they're not comfortable around. There's a lot of stories that are told in that way, in those inflections, in those that body language.
Yeah, and I know the general statistic for that is the communication is a 738-55 rule,
Okay.
where 7% is the actual words that come out of your mouth, 38% is the tone, and then 55% is nonverbal communication.
Mhm.
And when I used to train on communication in different areas, that was one of the things we talked about. And I used to give the example as well, be like, oh yeah, tell me something you're really excited about, and then I would give like the reaction, like, oh, that's great, that's wonderful, and then versus, Oh yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm saying the exact same thing, but two totally different,
So
things.
different and different feelings for your listener as well. They're like, "Oh, great, you get it," or "God, do they like me?" Because they're completely different reactions to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can talk about this all day, but just really briefly. I mean, this is one of the reasons why there's sometimes misinterpretation, miscommunication through just
Yes.
email and text because you
Text.
don't get.
Yeah.
I mean, you can
Nothing.
get the tone if you've established a relationship with the person, but if you've never established a relationship with a person, like you can't necessarily understand what their tone is, and you're
Mhm.
definitely not getting the nonverbal cues. So I used to be that when people wanted to like have a conversation with me through email, I'd say, okay, thank God for the updates in technology. Let's jump on a Microsoft Teams call or a Zoom call or whatever,
Mhm.
so I can actually look at you while we're talking.
Yeah.
So I can hear you. I don't have to read an email and be like, well, I'm trying to figure out like what you're actually trying to say here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the vibes, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just the word, it's what is the vibe?
Right, right, right. It's vibes, it's context, it's everything. It's everything. But that's where I know like I'm really big into AI. I'm really big into like
Mhm.
learning like the language, the LLMs, but I get nervous with that replacing the communication, like the email communication,
Mhm.
because again, everything will be kind of either generic or tailored to how the person. I know they have programs and stuff like that where it's tailored to how the person's profile is put into the system, so you can actually generate
Mm.
a response based on how they want to hear it. And there's none of that personal
Yeah.
personal touch anymore. And yeah, that's why communication and just like I hate calling them soft skills. I will take a page from Simon Sinek and I will call them human skills. So I think the human skills and all of them, not just communication, but communication, active listening, emotional intelligence, like work ethic, collaboration, teamwork, like all of those are going to be so crucially important or vitally important to us as a workforce in the years to come as AI starts to be automated in some of these other areas. That
Mhm.
that people building, that people relationship is going to be so, so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting too. The most interesting thing I heard recently about AI was from a professor, I think he's at George Mason University, and he has his students answer each question on a test twice. What does AI say the answer is? And then what's your answer? And something that he found was that the answers that the students were giving themselves were way more in depth than the AI. They were way more detailed. There was much more nuance. So it's teaching them many things. One, using AI isn't cheating. Not everyone would agree with that, but it's a good reference. It's very much a smart Google. But then you have to understand the nuance and be able to answer it in your own words. And a lot of the time, people are finding that their own words, their own thoughts, their own perspectives that they're bringing to answering questions really have more depth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I love that. And by the way, I'm going to be taking some of that information. I'm going to be passing it along to some of the people that have been struggling on the collegiate level, on the academic
Yes.
level with students that are just copy paste, ChatGPT or
Hmm.
Gemini, whatever they're using. But yeah, I'm going to be passing that information along. That's like a really, really good idea.
Yeah, it's a good workaround. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. And it's inviting you to say, okay, well, yeah, you can use it. That's fine. Here, and I'm going to tell you you can use it. But this is what I want to see the differentiation. I want to see like what you're getting out of AI, and then I want to see what your own personal words are. Like, right. I love that. I love that. Oh, that's going to be such a great thing. So thank you for that. So, um, so yeah, so you describe yourself as someone who doesn't just look at a problem, but looks at the whole system around it, the full cube, not just the square. How did that mindset develop for you, and how do you keep that kind of thinking sharp in fast-paced work?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think at the beginning of work as a young practitioner, I was already very attuned to tone and body language and nonverbal. And it's something I highlighted as one of my top skills over time. And it was because I started to understand nuance, or I had some intuition about the best way to talk to someone. I gave the example earlier of some people are not comfortable around others. So sometimes it's better to have a one on one with them. Sometimes they light up more in a group. So it's just understanding what's best for a person. And as I started working with customers and clients, I wanted to know how they like work delivered to them. How do they like to have conversations with me? When are they open? When are they closed off? When are they not available? What are the things that they're worried about? Not just directly the delivery that you've been given on paper in black and white, but what is their view of success? And so I started thinking of it as most challenges I've been given, I view as a square. And the way I like to investigate, be that informational interviews, looking at archival data, asking questions from stakeholders adjacent to my client, other things that could affect it, environmental factors that could affect our own delivery. The way I view that is not as a square, but as a cube. I want to know, what is that cube made of? What is inside of it? What is in the air around it? What are all the things that are going to have some sort of impact, some sort of friction or assistance with what we're trying to deliver? And I think that that is one of the things a lot of people miss. I've seen projects where you get into it and you're delivering a project and you realize another team is delivering the exact same project. So it's duplication of efforts. The clients aren't talking, the teams aren't talking. And it's just really important. Something I started doing was reaching into my internal teams when I was working for contracting firms to see what other clients in that organization were we working with? Is there anything I'm delivering that's going to be opposing to what they're delivering? And just being more informed to have a wider view of the landscape, have a wider view of consistency and delivery. Those things are just so important. And for me, on paper, you may assume, what is the goal? What is the mission? What are the things that we have on our checklist to deliver? That isn't going to help you at the end of the day if that customer didn't view your delivery as a win. So you really need to go in and clarify, what does success look like to you? What does you looking good to your boss look like? What does all those things? Because that's when that customer is going to become a repeat customer if they trust you, if they trust that you are hearing them, that you're giving them what they really want, what they can then present to their leadership, and something that's going to make them look good and have more of that ripple effect of delivery and competence and success that's really moving their challenge forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Kind of viewing it, and I love it moving from the square into viewing it as a cube. Viewing it as a whole system. Like and organizations. Yeah, I mean, I've said it on the podcast before, and I talk about it in my work too. Organizations are ecosystems, and every single, it doesn't matter how big it is, every single person or every single position within that organization plays a part in how that organization runs and how that organization operates. And you were even talking about siloed, like duplicate efforts because of silos and everything, and miscommunication, all that kind of stuff, or lack of communication. You want to say miscommunication, we'll just call it lack of communication. And it's so prevalent in so many organizations that they kind of miss that. And that's why, again, you looking at it not just from a box, but looking at it from a cube to understand how deep things go. It just reminds me, just the buzzword for OD professional, like root cause analysis, getting to everything. And root cause analysis is, you could ask the five whys. You can do like that little technique or whatever. But after you're done with that, like it's just kind of looking, say, oh, what are they doing over here? What are they doing over here? And I know that I was talking to somebody on one of the shows prior to this, and we were saying like organizational development is in everything. Like it's in everything. Like if you're a consultant, if you're working in organizational development within an organization, you are in everything. You're supposed to be. even though you don't really want to be. You're some Again, you're in everything, but nobody knows what you do. So it's like, but
It's
yeah,
true.
that's such a great answer, just to be able to see the organization, what you're doing from the perspective of not just the problem, the perspective of like a deeper analysis and a deeper understanding of what is going on within the organization. So that always comes back to, you talk about change management, you talk about like change is being able to really get to the root of why we're changing, why, like, letting people know why we're changing, and putting it into that cube,
Yeah,
having other people see the cube.
exactly. And it's also looking at as always the potential to further problem solve, not showing up and thinking you have the answer. And I haven't thought about it in that way, but it really is important because if you go in and you're just answering your own question and there's one thing that you want to push through, you could be setting yourself up for some really dramatic pitfalls. You could think that data is the problem, and it could be the interconnection of a few different teams, and maybe they're having a challenge. There could be a completely different reason why something isn't working, and you could have your beautiful delivery of a tool or a technology or a system, but that might not actually be what's going to get that team to a next phase or to help solve that challenge.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about like you've worked with data and systems and strategies, but you always bring it back to people. Okay, so again, that human-centered approach. So how do you use that data in a way that supports connection, belonging, and growth rather than just tracking those numbers in there?
Yeah, I mean, you need to know your customer. And your customer, like we said, isn't just one person. It's the person, the system that they live in at work, the environment, the other teams, initiatives, leadership that affects their team, their mission, their goals, their job, their position. And one thing that I did recently was I was looking at data. It was for a system that needed help with their time to hire. And there was a wider context behind, hey, we need to get to this goal. And someone might have come in and be like, great, just follow these steps. That'll get you to the goal. But that wouldn't have solved the problem because, again, there's a human element. You need to learn about what has been successful, what hasn't, what changes has happened. What does success like look on every team? Are they aligned in what success looks like? And looking at those important things is going to help you find the answer. One thing that we looked at first was the security team. The reason it was taking so long, validating a clearance or something, but it really was just the day-to-day being consistent, following the same procedures, making sure everyone's informed and supported. There were some teams with a large group of collaboration where there was support, where there was information sharing and information knowledge management, where they could really identify where to find answers to questions. But then there was other groups that were like, hey, I'm on an island on my own. I haven't really been onboarded. I really need a mentor. I don't know where any of the documents are, and the other team's saying, what do you mean you don't know where the documents are? We know where the documents are. But it really helped us understand why different things were happening, why the time wasn't adding up, why the math wasn't mathing in some of the areas, and to really understand what was the human experience. What were the things that were quick wins that could be enacted immediately? What were some of those longer term things that needed to be developed over time? And like you said, what were some of those more soft skills, or what were those pieces that we're weaving in between, you know, buy-in, like we said earlier, understanding the mission, understanding why we're doing something and why it's important, because that was one of the things we found too, was there were people that thought different processes weren't important or that they themselves were not important, but they were so integral to the greater mission and goal, and just helping them see the impact of their work really helped.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know earlier I said like, most people, don't feel like most people really don't want to go to work. But I think a lot of people, even though like they might not want to be there, they might want to know like how they're impacting, like kind of what you were talking about, like how their work really impacts the overall like process or system or the organization as a whole. I mean, I worked I've worked many different places, but one of the places that I worked that I always refer to just because it is what it is. I used to work at Amazon, and I needed a break, and like a mental just like clearing where I can go to work. I can remind myself that I had a really good solid work ethic. um, but you just get caught in the system, and there's no like, how are you doing today? I mean, you're basically packing boxes, or stuffing, stowing stuff, or putting stuff on trucks and deliveries and stuff. And for me, like I actually loved the system because I wanted to understand the system. I wanted to understand how it worked and how it changed from fulfillment center to fulfillment center. um, but it can get to a point where like you see a lot of the people that are really disengaged, or really just because they don't know really what it looks like in the overall, and really how important they are to organizations. So yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was reading a book called, I believe it's called Making Trader Joe. And it was just a story. I love learning how businesses came to be. And it was the story about how Trader Joe's founder got there. And they were talking about belonging and how they built their community of belonging. And one of the things that was a job that wasn't looked at as, oh, this is important, was retrieving shopping carts. But it's so important because people can't shop if they don't have shopping carts to, do that shopping with. So it was just reframing of impact and why every little piece of the puzzle is so important. And nothing can happen if there's not if they don't have those essential things. Who's going to come to a store if it's dirty? Who's going to come to a store if they can't consistently get access to things? So even if a job seems simple or doesn't seem important, it could be one of the most important pieces.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, just reinforcing the idea of organizations as ecosystems.
Yes.
Every part is so important in that ecosystem, in order for the organization to just run, I don't want to say seamlessly, because nothing ever runs seamlessly, but run as close to efficient and productive and seamless as possible.
Hmm.
Yeah, great. So we have a couple more questions here for you. So a lot of folks tuning in are early in their OD journeys, or maybe in the middle of a career shift. What's something you'd want them to know about finding their voice and building meaningful path forward?
Hmm. Yeah. Having purpose in your career, it's something that very much is a driver. And I think we've touched on it a little bit. One of the things I have felt when I've showed up to work is I want to matter to someone. I want my work to matter. And I think purpose driven work, or what is my purpose, is very different for each person, not only each organization, but it's really about that human experience. And we spend a large majority of our lives at work. So to feel like we matter and like our job and the work that we do and the time that we put in has purpose is very important. And early in your career, remember back feeling like it was a whole new world, like there was so much opportunity, but also that there was this waiting period before I had a lot of responsibility or before I could do what I wanted, things like that. And I saw a lot of people who are not willing to be flexible, to try new things. They had a very solid idea of the one path they wanted, but I found that those people who were very open to a diverse set of experiences, who learned different things, who worked with different people, who said, yes, and I want to do that. It was very important. And also being a voice in a room. I think when you're starting out, it's always good to listen first because, again, you can hear what is the emotion in the room, what's the attitude in the room, what are the norms of how things are communicated, when is a good time to speak, when is the time to wait and listen, but also in the background, just absorb as much knowledge and information as possible because when you are consistent and when you do deliver and when you show up and you're there for your teams, you will get that opportunity to grow, to speak. But if you're doing the work and you're keeping updated on the knowledge in your field and you're reading things outside of work and you're staying attuned to what's happening, what's changing in your type of business, you'll be able to answer those questions and to be more of a source of good delivery, a source of great knowledge, a positive speaker, someone who's asked to talk again, because you will have a breadth and a depth of knowledge when you are given that opportunity to speak.
Yeah, it sounds like an Ava. And that's perfect. I mean, I love the advice that you say, like when you first go into an organization and you first go into a meeting, like not just coming out of the gates and saying, well, this is the way things need to do it. Like sitting and listening and really getting the pulse and the understanding of the organization, of the team, of the, processes and everything. And you talking about, especially there too, like the growth part of it, really continuing to learn about your field, continuing to grow, continuing to, look at like the articles and, the books or, watching YouTube videos. You can learn so much on YouTube nowadays, by the way. Um, but like, just continuing to do that, both formal and informal learning opportunities. And I always look at, so, we talked a little bit yesterday about like my background actually is in like literature and creative writing and I've learned perspectives and I've learned empathy like through reading fiction books because I get to see the world through the character's eyes and I get to experience the emotions that particular character is experiencing. And yeah, they might be fictional, but they were created by somebody and they were
Mm-hmm.
created based off the human emotion. And it doesn't matter if it's sci-fi, if it's fantasy, if it's literary fiction, it doesn't matter. You still get that perspective. So I'm a really big advocate for reading fiction and reading fiction to really understand perspectives. Yeah, so I mean I think that's great and like looking at different ways to learn, and different ways to learn how to listen.
Exactly. And I foot stomp what you said. Continuous learning is so important and it does not have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be another degree. It doesn't have to be a hundreds of dollars certification. It can be that LinkedIn learning. It can be micro learning, watching even some TikToks if you're watching the right ones. Always validate the information that you're learning before you share it. But there are apps like Libby, which are free audio book and Kindle like apps for your library. You don't have to buy all these things. There are free articles on LinkedIn. There are so many ways to stay engaged and informed, and even having more relaxed networking discussions with people, learn from other people. I think on the job learning is the biggest percentage of learning as an adult is in the job, on the job, as your experience, being in tactical, being there in person, learning from your mistakes, failing forward. That's when you're going to learn the most. So talk to the people around you, talk to the people that were in the job before you if you can talk to them before they offboard. Those things are just so important because those people already ingrained and woven into your organization are going to be able to give you so much more information than you can ever find yourself. So talk to people too when you want to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Emphasizing the networking in there, you know. And I think it reminded so you were saying too, like, it doesn't have to cost anything. I was just thinking of I was thinking of Good Will Hunting when like Will says, he says, I got the same education with a free library card and late fees at the library, you know. It's like, or I'm paraphrasing, of course, because I can't think
Yeah.
of the quote off the top of my head, but there are so many free resources out there. Not necessarily free, but there's a lot of inexpensive resources out there and being able to access them. And people are a resource. That is so, so important. So, um, yeah. So right now we'll get a little bit more into you now. So right now you are open to new projects and collaboration. What kind of challenges are energizing you these days, and what kind of people or teams do you love working with?
Yes. So I'm currently open to full-time work, contract work, especially for organizations where I can help drive development in their projects in technology, healthcare, financial sector. I love to problem solve, and I love when teams are curious, they're open to change, they're committed to making the work environment stronger for that human experience. We've been talking about their organization to succeed, but also their people to come along with them. I love untangling complex systems and translating data into insights and designing interventions specifically for those organizations and for those people, and really building a partnership. I want to come in and not be a wrecking ball or a bowling ball. I really want to come in hand and work with a group of people and help build their strategic next steps in their work. But I love everything culture, communication, and just to drive that sustainability of that organization, of that workforce as change is constant. So how do you stay relevant? How do you stay above water in a constant churning, ocean of workforce?
Yeah, and people will be able to connect with you on LinkedIn, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to have your contact information in the show notes, so people can be able to reach out to you. And I'm going to say to the listeners, if you are listening to this, absolutely connect with Melissa. And if you are looking for consulting work, please look at her resume. It is impressive. So yeah. So we're going to close out here. So I want us to wrap up with something reflective. If you had to describe the way you approach OD or leadership in just a phrase or a sentence, what would that sound like today?
Yes. So I thought a lot about this, and what I ended up writing down was design from the inside out, listen deeply, align clearly, and build organizations that encourage people to thrive. And what I mean by that is we are given messages and so much information of what we should be, what's new, what's relevant, but really look at your own organization, do the time to look inside. Where do you want to go? What makes the most sense for your organization, for your goal, for your people? And then listen to them. Don't make decisions in isolation. Really listen to what's going on and then align everyone clearly. Once you know what your direction is, and then build organizations that encourage your people to thrive because they are more likely to input into your work. They're more likely to be happy at work, and you're going to see more of that delivery and that success when your people are happy.
Melissa, thank you. That is such a great way to end the show here, end the conversation. I want to thank you so much for being a guest today on the show. This was such a great question, such a great conversation for me. And I have a few things that I'm going to be taking away from this. So we talked a little bit yesterday about how important it is for me to learn and how I learn from having conversations like these. So thank you so much for being here today. Have a great
Thank
rest of your day.
you. You
And
as
to the
well.
listener, have a great day as well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Unboxing OT. I want to thank Melissa for being a part of this episode and for bringing such thoughtful, grounded insights to this conversation. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. Her profile is linked in the show notes, or reach out to her via email at melissadonegan.io@gmail.com. Again, that email will also be in the show notes. And if you'd like to explore more about the work we do at Pearson Pearson, head over to www.pearsonpearson.llc. There, you'll find details about our consulting services, the Flow of Five Tiers framework, and our new self-paced reflection program, the 21-day leadership realignment. Whether you're leading a team, guiding change, or building an entire organization, these tools are designed to help you create clarity, strengthen alignment, and keep people at the center of your work. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, keep listening with intention, keep leading with openness, and keep unboxing the ways we can create healthier, more human centered organizations. Take care.